I don't know what my future holds, but I know who holds my future.
It's our task to extract those gems that get buried under the dust of time.
Welcome to Elder Wisdom, Stories from the Green Bench. This is episode number 52 as we launch into the 5th season of this podcast. If you don't recognize my voice, it's because I'm new this season. My name is Kathy Buckworth, and today I have the pleasure of sharing the bench with my co-host, Evelyn Brindle, who lives at the Village of Erin Meadows in Mississauga, just one of the long-term care Schlegel Village retirement residences, along with her husband, David. Today, Evelyn and I are welcoming our special guest, Don Hewson, also a resident at the same village. But before Evelyn and Don join me, I'd like to remind you what this podcast is all about. It's the brainchild of the Schlegel family. It's long been founder Ron Schlegel's belief that the greatest untapped resource in Canada, if not the world, is the collective wisdom of our elders. And today, we have some great wisdom to be shared from Don Hewson as he tells us about his interesting life as an intellectual property lawyer and shares some advice for younger generations on the importance of an education, as well as his love of classical music and author Louise Penny. I'm Kathy Buckworth, one of your co-hosts for the Elder Wisdom Podcast, or Stories from the Green Bench, as we like to call it. Our other host is Evelyn Brindle. Hello, Evelyn. It's so nice to speak with you again.
Hi, Kathy. Yes, it's nice to be together, and I think we'll have a very interesting podcast today.
I think so. This is officially episode number 52 of the podcast, besides our transition episode with Aaron Davis and Doug Robinson the last time. And it's the first one that you and I have the privilege of handling. How do you feel about that today, Evelyn?
I'm a little nervous. It's the first time I'm doing anything like this, but I know Don will put us all at ease as well as you. So I'm looking forward to a very good conversation this morning.
Me too. And I understand, Evelyn, that you're at the Village of Erin Meadows in Mississauga, the Schlegel Village there. So you're at the same village as our special guest today, who is Don Hewson.
Yes, definitely. He's sitting right across the table from me. So we'll have a nice conversation this morning. Don's had a very interesting life, and I think everyone's going to really enjoy hearing about him.
Absolutely. So we'll get to Don right now. He's going to tell us some great stories about his life, but as a little bit of setup, I'd like to mention that Don's background is in engineering until he decided that his true calling was in intellectual property law, which he practiced for 40 years. He's going to let us know how those two disciplines came together to give him a most interesting career. Good morning, Don.
Good morning.
You're so lucky to be sitting across from Evelyn. I'm across town. I'm in Mississauga also, but not quite with you guys.
Oh, really? Good.
So, Don, you worked in technical international property law. So tell us a little bit about that and why you needed engineering to do that.
Well, intellectual property law comprises 4 main fields: patents, trademarks, industrial design, and copyright. My particular interests were patents. And in order to understand and work in patent law, that's a very technical area. And you really need an engineering background or a science background in order to understand what's going on and in order to understand and be able to talk to any inventor who comes to you with a new invention or a challenge against somebody else's patent, this sort of thing. You have to be able to understand the technology, very wide range of technologies, I must say, in my case. But you have to be a quick learner and you have to really know how to read technical documentation and understand it, get the gist of it on the first reading and be able to work it from there. As for the other fields, trademarks, copyright, industrial design, they're more, what do I want to say, subjective. A judge one time said in a copyright case that the particular, rather in a trademark case, that the particular trademark at issue was similar to another, so similar to another trademark that it confused the judge, but not similar enough to the other, to ordinary people that it did not confuse them. So it became a bit of a problem. The judge found finally in favor of the trademark that was at issue. Anyway, back to technology, which probably comprised 90% or so, 85, 90% of my business. Um, we had to cover a very broad spectrum of technologies. The only real area that I did not get into is pharmacology, pharmaceuticals, and so on. That's sort of beyond me. I'm not an organic chemist. I'm an electrical engineer, but I had a fairly good background, of course, in ordinary engineering as well. As far as the science, people with science backgrounds, particularly mathematics and physics, they should be okay too in the regular patent field. Sorry, I'm concentrating more on patents because, as I say, that was probably 85, 90% of my practice.
Well, the only great idea I had for a patent ever, Dawn, is a reversible hockey sweater, home and away. So I don't think that would have flown. What about you, Evelyn? Any great ideas over there?
Oh, not about patents, but I am interested in hearing about what was the most important or interesting patent or invention that you dealt with.
Oh, several interesting fields. As an aside, one of the interesting patents that I did was for the chocolate coating that is found on Chapman's ice cream.
Oh,
Oh, that's interesting.
One of my clients was a food chemist, and I did a lot of work for him. I did a lot of work with Duracell in battery technology. I did a lot of work in radar technology, radar detection in particular. And I did quite a bit of work in concrete forming. Probably one of the most interesting patents that I wrote was to the device that really revolutionized the fast and efficient forming of huge poured concrete buildings, hotels, apartment buildings, condominiums, and so on. They used very old-fashioned ways of doing those things until somebody here in Toronto came up with the idea of using flying forms that were made of aluminum so that they were light. You could fly them up with a crane, put them in place, get them established in the right area, dump concrete on them, pull them out in the next day or so, put them up again. And you'd really leapfrog a couple of sets of them. But what would normally have taken maybe 18 or 24 months to build a fairly good sized building could be done in probably less than 12.
Great, interesting.
so interesting. And I understand that you traveled quite a bit, Dawn. Is that right?
Yes, I've for two reasons. One, my wife and I like doing cruises. We've done 50 odd cruises, but we also I had to go to. Well, didn't have to, I should say, but as a senior partner in a law firm specializing in intellectual property, they required that the senior partners go to one or two international conventions a year. So in doing so, I was able to get to all 5 of the major continents, going to international conferences. And usually my wife, Yumi, and I would then look around for a cruise that might be coming into or out of the conference area and book a cruise while we were at it and take another week or two holiday and go and visit a few other countries while we were at it. So we've been to 87 countries.
Oh, my goodness.
But world of patent law in particular, or intellectual property law for that matter, is universal in that if you want to establish some market presence in a particular country, say Japan, Germany, whatever, you had to establish a patent or trademark protection issue in that country. And that meant that we had to employ the services of attorneys in those countries who were familiar with the law of that particular country, and in turn they would employ my services and those of many other Canadians to handle issues in this country. The only exception was that if I had a Canadian client who wanted to get protection in the United States, I was allowed to practice before the United States Patent and Trademark Office as well.
Don, in doing some of the research on what intellectual property law was, found out that April 26th is going to be World IP Day, and that this year their theme is Women and IP, and celebrating the can-do attitude of women, inventors, creators. And I found that there are quite a few women who really did produce some interesting or create some interesting products, like the windshield wiper and the dishwasher. And of course, one that I was a little familiar with was Hedy Lamarr, who actually is considered to be the mother of the cell phone and really did a lot of, besides acting. Um, but the sad part is that I found that there's 1 in 5 who are women in most of the engineering schools, and that uh, today they're taking up 20% of the class area, or 40% of them never go into it or drop out. Have you any suggestions of how to improve this statistic and how to encourage women to stay in the field and produce some of the creativity that they are known for?
Well, I think there are probably two areas where they should perhaps concentrate more. The first is going backwards. Once a woman, a female, graduates from engineering, or science for that matter, but let's stick with engineering, she must be treated equally with any other engineer in that particular corporation or setup, and must not be discriminated against, and must be encouraged to innovate, must be encouraged to work collegially with all of the other people that she's with, and start a project and finish it. Emphasize to all students that there's no field that they should not go into. I think the precedent is that about 50% or more of students, undergraduate students in medicine, are now women. Why not in engineering? What's the difference? They're both science-oriented professions. Sure, they're a lot different, but you don't go into it unless you're a quick learner, unless you can see the big picture of things, and be interested in innovation at all times.
Okay.
You mentioned high school starting there, Don. I think that's a great point. I am looking at my notes, and you went to Port Credit High School. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And it's just down the road from me. And did you notice were there classes offered then in engineering or anything that you ended up going into in university?
Oh, a couple of comments. The Port Credit High School that you're aware of is not the one I went
Okay.
to. The one I went to is down in the town or the village of Port Credit.
Ah.
It burned down the year after I left high school, and they moved it up to Mineola Road. There were no subjects that particularly were directed towards engineering, other than that those of us who would have been interested in the first instance probably excelled in the mathematics and physics areas.
It is a high school now that does attract actually students for their science program. I know some of my friends' kids have gone there. So it carries on. How's that your tradition?
I didn't know that. It's
Yeah,
same as Cawthra attracting people who are interested in the performing arts.
exactly right. Exactly right. And besides all of your travel around the world, Don, I know you often go up the CN Tower and you have, I think, a story to tell us about that.
Oh, yes. I had a client, a Swede, in fact, who was the consulting engineer on the CN Tower when it was being built. His particular specialty was slip forming and heavy lifting. The slip forming is slipping or moving a form up vertically for a vertical or almost vertical surface. But if you recall looking at the CN Tower, it slopes, the sides slope inwards as it goes up. So they had not only to slip sideways, but upwards. And he came up with some very good ideas on how to do that. And then these forms were very, very heavy, and he was a specialist in heavy lifting. Whenever he came to Canada, my wife and I took him to dinner, and we never bothered to ask, where would you like to have dinner? It was always the CN Tower. So one day, as we were going up in the elevator in the CN Tower, he was pointing something out through the window in the top of the elevator, and the elevator attendant said, "You gentlemen seem to be very interested in the CN Tower. Is there anything I can tell you about it?" My client turned and said to her very sweetly, "No, thank you. I built it."
It's like the best story. I love it. I love it. And of course, one of your travels, you mentioned in passing that you went to Japan. I think something special happened there once, didn't it?
Well, I met my wife there.
Okay, that'll count.
It's I guess that was pretty special. Yeah, my wife is Japanese, and we go to Japan. Well, not so recently because of the pandemic, but we've been to Japan about 30 times or so. And uh, I had a number of clients, Panasonic being one of my major clients over in Japan. So I had to go over there quite often in any event. And it, of course, is the second largest economy in the world, and very innovative, and very interesting place to go in any event. I'll tell you another interesting story. At the beginning of May, they have what they call Golden Week, because the whole week is set up with about 4 holidays. So um, Golden Week it is. But my partner, one of my partners, was over many years ago during Golden Week, but he didn't know it was Golden Week. The firm that we were with is a British firm, and its headquarters are in London. Anyway, Richard had a day off, or many days off, and he was in Kyoto, so he thought it would be a good idea to take a little trip around Kyoto, one of these sightseeing trips. And he sat beside another gentleman, and they started talking, noting that each of them had a British accent. And Richard said to his seatmate, "What do you do?" And he said, "Oh, I'm a patent attorney." And he asked, "Which firm are you with?" And he mentioned the name of the firm. And Richard looked at him and said, "Oh, we must be partners."
Must have been a large firm.
There were about 70 or 80 partners.
Yeah.
They spread around 6 or 7 countries. So
Wow.
we only had 3 partners in Canada.
Yeah. I have a grandson who will be graduating this year at UBC and still considering different fields to go into, possibly law. Uh, is there anything that he's not interested in engineering, but he does have a lot of interests in everything and almost a photographic memory kind of thing. So, is there anything in the field of intellectual property law that might be of interest to him?
Yes, there could be a trademark field. could be quite interesting to them because there's no real requirement for a knowledge of technology, but you have to have quick recall. Having a photographic memory is not that so important as long as quick recall, so that you can distinguish between judgments, say that one judge said on a particular issue and another judge said on a fairly similar issue, but maybe went in a different direction. You have to be able to understand the differences. You also have to have a very good facility in the English language or French, but in this country. But it's very important because you have to be able to either express exactly what it is that you want to say or obfuscate what you want to say, depending on which way you want to go.
Okay, great. I'll pass that on to him, give him some ideas to look into. Thank you.
Besides your brain being so full of this technical and legal information, Dawn, I understand you have some very wide, diverse interests, which we discovered early on in the podcast before we started recording, a classical music aficionado, correcting us on some of our research notes, as well as you enjoy reading legal fiction, and in particular, you like Louise Penny. So tell us how that all started. When did you get into classical music?
Well, in high school at Port Credit, we had an excellent music teacher, Marv Langton, and he was a member of the Mendelssohn Choir, and he was an aficionado of the three Bs, Bach, Brahms, Beethoven. And he got me interested in music to such an extent that another classmate of mine, who's now a doctor, and I would go down, even in grade 11, probably more grade 12 and 13, to Toronto Symphony Orchestra concerts quite often. So we went down there and would listen to a lot of very interesting classical music. In fact, Dr. Langton brought out Sir Ernest Macmillan as a speaker one time to our music class. I just got interested. I took a course in music in grade 13 as an extra course, just for the fun of it, and did very well in it. Of course, the theory of music is quite interesting. I'm not so much a performer. I have trouble playing the piano, and I can't play any of the other instruments because I'm a linear thinker. I can't get my mind around pressing two keys to get one particular note, and two other keys to get the next note to it. On a piano, you press one key, you get a note, press the next key, and you get another note that's very close to it. Anyway,
I wish I had that argument when my parents forced me to take piano lessons. I'm a linear thinker, Mom. I can't do that. Sorry, Dawn, carry on.
Well, anyway, then when I got into engineering and as an undergraduate, I learned that there was a radio station in Coburg that specialized in broadcasting classical music. In order to get it, I had to go and buy or build an FM radio tuner. So I did. I built one. And I listened to this station, which I think is probably the predecessor to the 96.3 FM station now here in Toronto. So as I was studying, I would listen to FM radio classical music. I just was not into people squealing and shouting and a lot of thump, thump, thump in the background. So, and I've never been able to get there. So all the way along, I've been interested in it. I had a brother-in-law who unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, who was an operatic tenor. His daughter is a professor of music at a university in Alaska. So we have in that part of the family a lot of musical background. I'm the only one in my family who was particularly interested in music. I at one time thought I might go into musicology, but then I thought, no, I don't think so. My family, going back several generations, were either engineers or lawyers, so I figured I'd probably better stick in that area.
I actually record a radio show at Zoomer Radio, Dawn, where Classical 96.3 is just down the hall from us. And so every day when I walk through the hallways, there's all this lovely classical music playing. So I totally understand where you're coming from on that.
We'll say hello to Moses.
I will. He's still there.
Do you have a favorite composer or piece of music that's sort of your go-to, you're never tired of hearing again and again?
Probably Beethoven. I will go to his later symphonies, his piano concerti, the violin concerto. I'm not that keen on Beethoven opera. It's too heavy. As far as I'm concerned, for opera, I would rather go to Mozart or Rossini. But and some of Brahms I particularly like, but I'm quite Catholic in my tastes, in that if it was written before 1900 or so, I like it.
Interesting. Okay. But do you also like Scott Joplin and the Gershwins, which came
Oh yeah,
later?
well, yeah. Then getting into the 20th century, Scott Joplin, the Gershwins, the Beatles are all favorites of mine. And there used to be a group in Canada called Lighthouse, who were a jazz band, but they had a very eclectic mixture of violin and cello and all sorts of interesting instruments. The violinist, or violinist as he called himself, because he played a 5-string violin. It was a special our viola that he had a 5th string put on so that he could get up into the violin range, was a good friend of mine. And so I used to listen to them quite a bit, and several of other bands of that ilk, Blood, Sweat and Tears, for example, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, who are classicists who play jazz.
I'm going to switch gears just a little bit here because we have your brain with us right now, and I'm going to ask you if you have any advice. And we touched on it at the beginning, perhaps any advice for younger generations as they're starting out, as they're maybe graduating from high school.
Absolutely. I've got advice for them and advice for their parents and grandparents and so on. First of all, if they're at all interested in any of the sciences, medicine, engineering, forestry, whatever, be sure that you concentrate and do well, excel, if you will, in your mathematics and science courses. Chemistry, physics, any of the math courses that they do, try to get along as well as you can. Pay attention to a good English course, because you do have to know English, and you have to be able to write very well. Um, Other than that, just be diligent about it. Don't overwork, but do pay attention. And if the teacher makes a mistake in teaching physics, as my teacher did in high school, correct him.
Good.
The parents should encourage their children to do that, but they must encourage them also to get into collegial activities, team sports, and so on. Get involved. Don't be loners. As far as the rest of it is concerned, I think that whenever a new child is born, the parents and or grandparents should establish an RESP for them, so that when the child finishes grade 12, there should be a fairly good accumulation of money, which will not put them through university, but it will certainly be a huge assist in putting them through university. My wife and I did that for all 4 grandchildren, and notwithstanding that their parents were doing very, very well indeed, we assisted to quite an extent. if for no other reason than to exhaust the RESPs before they disappeared, given that the government of Canada provides an additional 20% to each RESP. You may as well use their money as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
I have 4 grown children and 2 tiny grandsons, and we have done the same thing as soon as the little ones were born as well. Great advice.
Yeah, and I think encouraging them to do whatever it is they want to do. 2 of my grandchildren have degrees in business. One has a degree in nursing, and the other has degrees in physics and mathematics and teaching.
Yep.
Smart
It's
family.
very important to encourage them to do something that they like and enjoy, because they will stick with it. And it's also one other thing I would like to add to Don's remarks is that from the beginning, encourage and share things with each child, whether it's your own or a grandchild. Expose them to a lot of different things. And I found that when we took our kids out and shared them with things with them, maybe at a concert somewhere outdoors or a sports event or something associated with history, nature, those were learning times, and it really helped to develop their personalities and their interests.
I'm sure it did, and it reflects our own thinking as well, very much so. Let me go back one little step, though. If they can't get into university, at least get into some kind of post-secondary education, be it a community college or whatever.
Well, and you can't also disclaim the trades. My one grandson is very interested in doing that, got an apprenticeship, and is now a certified electrician and enjoys every single day going to work and doing so very well with the company that he's with. And we certainly do need good, experienced people in the trades these days. So that's another area that we just can't disclaim, and it's also helps.
Well, I would agree completely. The employment field is expanding. We're bringing in more and more immigrants.
Yes.
We're graduating more and more people out of high school. There's a lot more construction is going on. There's a whole lot of requirements for trained people in the trades,
Yes.
carpentry, bricklaying, God knows what. So you don't have to be a doctor or an engineer, but you must have a job that you can be proud of.
Definitely. And
And I
enjoy
love
doing.
And I love where this conversation has started, and I love where it's going as we talk about the future of our kids and grandkids. And we started, of course, with looking at your extraordinary life and career, Don. I want to
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for coming on this show today. I want to thank Annabelle as well, who's there with you, and Evelyn for helping to put this together. Evelyn, what do you think? We've done it, the first show.
Yes, surprisingly. And I think Don was an excellent choice for the first interviews that we did today. And I learned quite a lot of interesting things, something that I wish I had known about when I was in school back then. But I do enjoy and love the field I went into. So
That's what's important.
definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining the show today. Thanks for everyone for listening today. On behalf of my co-host, Evelyn Brindle, I thank you for giving us a chance to bring you these stories of elder wisdom. We'd love to have you subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so, but we'd also love to hear your words of wisdom on social media. Please do, using the hashtag #ElderWisdom, which will also help others to find us on this green bench. We do love a review and a rating on the podcast. You can easily find it by going to elderwisdom.ca and following the link. Take a look at the Elder Wisdom Pledge Against Ageism while you're there, and please think about signing it. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Kathy Buckworth, and along with Evelyn Brindle, we look forward to sharing some more elder wisdom with you on the next episode of Stories from the Green Bench.
Elder Wisdom Stories from the Green Bench is brought to you by Schlegel Villages, a complete continuum of care, offering independent living to long-term care, celebrating and honoring the wisdom of the elder. To learn more about us, please go to our website, schlegelvillages.com.